Carson.
I feel like an alien spaceship like came down upon us, and Carson and I are like,
Carson. Hello.
just write your name in my journal for me.
Carson, look.
Aw, thanks.
Hi, sweetie.
Hey, Carson.
To you, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Papa. Happy birthday to you.
Okay.
Happy 75th.
There you go.
Would you like to help us pull them out?
Let's see, we'll put them in a plate. Is there enough plates here to do that?
I think so.
Put them there. One,
So what part was it?
2, 3, 5, 7.
Hello there.
I was going to say something really provocative.
There she is again.
Oh?
Oh, no.
Did you want a piece of cake, Carson? 75 years is not that unusual these days, but to live 75 years and be as healthy and as vibrant, as mentally alert, and as spiritually sound as you are, Dad, is quite an accomplishment. And you have so many accomplishments that fill all our houses and all the walls. But I think that you've probably made a lot of differences in people's lives that we've never seen. But I'd like you to hear some of the ways in which we have been touched by you, and some of the stories and some of the things that you've done that have made a big difference in our lives. And some of these everyone's heard and some nobody's heard. So some of the things we're going to tell you will be short and some will be long, but I think you've touched us all in many, many different ways. I think one of the things I'll start with a couple that I remember waking up every morning to listening to you singing Home on the Range in the shower. And it was the best alarm clock. I haven't found one yet that's better than that. And I remember one of the things that impressed me a lot, I don't even think you'll remember, maybe you will, but I was mouthing off at Mom sometime in my
Hard to believe.
Oh, just once?
Tell me about that one time you did it.
Just that one time?
Yeah.
Well,
No, that was the 60s.
Yeah.
The 60s, yeah,
a
exactly.
whole decade. Well, I think I'd heard a lot of different, gotten a lot of punishments for this, but I very vividly remember you're coming into my room once, and I was sitting on that yellow stool thing that you had, and I remember you saying to me, "She is my wife, and you will not speak to my wife that way." And suddenly, that was a different category than you won't speak to your mother that way. It was she is my wife, and you won't talk to my wife that way. And I remember just sitting down very quietly and thinking that meant something to me.
And you never did it again.
Never did it again. No.
I said that to Jeremy 2 or 3 times. It just kind of went in your eye, Bad mistake on your part,
Well, that was very nice.
Is it my turn? And you won it anyway. Okay. Do I have to stand up? Well,
Do I have to stand up?
whatever you want, Martha.
Okay. Well, Dad, I just want to tell you what you've really been a good role model for us and set a wonderful example as far as having integrity and virtue. And I can remember many times when something happened that really upset you or something, but I never, ever heard you use cuss words.
That's true.
I've never heard you use a profane word at all. And I must admit, there were many occasions when you could have slipped, and I admire that.
I inherited that, so that was the same thing that was true of my parents. And I never, my father set an example. I never heard him utter a profane word.
Real?
Mm-hmm. So it's very important to set examples in it.
Mhm. It is.
Now we're feeling very guilty.
Well.
And what about in your house, Martha?
Next.
I have a picture of innocence.
Along that, just following that same thought, I always wondered if this story was true, because I had this in my mind, and you might remember this, but about not ever cussing. I had it in my mind that one Easter Sunday, you and I were ready, and we were waiting for the girls to get ready before we were going to go to church, and he's in a suit, and we go out in the garage. I mean, I don't know if I've made this up or not, but you were trying to get something off the shelf, and a can of paint fell off and got a little bit on your suit. And you didn't say a word. You just calmly went back in the house and changed. Anyone else would have gone crazy or said something, and you just were very, didn't curse, just very calmly went back in the house. I don't know if you remember that or if that was true or not. But that was
You didn't ask me what I was thinking, though.
I guess one of the things that comes to mind for me as far as setting example is I think it's really important to have a balance in anyone's life. And anytime you get out of balance, you tend to be unhappy. And the four things that are important as far as balancing your profession, your family, your faith, and recreation or whatever else you like to do. And I think you've set a great example of having balance in all four areas of that and always maintaining that. And I think that's been a great example for me to look at, because at different times in my life when I've been very unhappy, it is typically when one of those four is way out of kilter, whether it's work or something is missing, something's not balanced. So I think that's something that's very important. It's been a good whatever it is you like to do.
Say that.
Isn't that real nice?
Well, mine are all very consistent with those same things. What I recall most would be Dad's well-known integrity. It was known throughout the community. And for me, when it really became evident was when I first was out interviewing for jobs. First got out of college back in, I guess it was 78, 79, and Dad had set up about 2 or 3 interviews with people kind of in my field, people that he didn't really work with but knew of. And in every case, every time I met with those folks, they always had great things to say about him, how they can recall things that he did for them in years past, and they were always eager to return the favor. And then I learned through the Dragon Club and through other organizations the Clean Gene name. I didn't think much about what that meant, but it meant more than just being, a good Christian and being faithful, but it was also high integrity, honesty, truthfulness, and those are things we try to impart to our kids today. So, high ethics is what I recall most about Dad.
You're doing a fine job.
Thank you. I wanted to think back in the late 70s. This relates to how time passes, but the late 70s at the office at our company, we had a benefit expert from Orlando come in to review all of our benefit programs, and he worked up a projection for each of the senior officers showing, upon retirement, here's what you can probably expect, and so forth. And I remember at that time that my life expectancy was 73. And so I said, well, that's about my lifespan, the remaining lifespan, from 1978 and on until I was 73 years old. Show you how time flies now. I'm 75 now, and I guess life expectancy, according to the tables, would be about 83 or 84. before. But as you all know, in 1981, I had a major setback when my dermatologist discovered this melanoma that was unfortunately a pretty deep one. And the surgeon, Dr. Edmer, who looked at the slides, he had been trained in pathology, and he went over to St. Anthony's and looked at the slides and came back, and he was a man of few words. He says, "You got a nasty one." He says, "You've got a 50-50 chance." Well, that kind of rocked me a little bit. So, but what I was concerned about then was that, and this is April of '81, was that I wanted, and I prayed that I would live long enough to see what became Jessica and Nathan, because they had not arrived, and they were due in about 6 months. And at that point, I just was praying that I'd make it at least 6 months. If I lost the toss of the coin on the 50% thing, that I wanted to make it long enough to see them. And the Lord has blessed me, because I've not only seen those two, but we've seen Cameron, Kendall, Carson, and it's just been wonderful. And then we've been able to watch Elena grow and develop, and Nathan. So that's one of the many blessings I've had. But I've just been blessed with good health, and I dodged that bullet. And I don't know what other bullets we'll have, but I'm prepared to deal with them. And I just feel like that all of this is extra time that the Lord gave me that maybe I didn't deserve, but I'll take it. Enjoy it. Stagger around the tennis court. Stagger around, and last few times I played, Mike, I've staggered around. I can't go for drop shots, but I've won every time.
Bound away.
Just
Yeah.
adjust your game.
Yeah, well, just place the ball where they can't get it. Hit it over their head. Hit it short where they can't get to it either. So, fortunately, there are a few in there that aren't any faster than I am. It works out. But I thank you for a wonderful evening. It's been a great deal and good company. But who was that?
I was just gonna say, 2 years ago, I came down here. I was having a bad time in my life for a while, so I came down here to stay and have a break. And I remember talking to you, and you were talking about sort of like the things that the little things that you did with your day that made life really special. And even now, like, that kind of stayed with me. And you were just talking about, like, your process of reading and the stuff that you like to do, and how much so many of the little things meant so much. And I've never forgotten that, and I still appreciate that's in my life too now.
Thank you.
So.
All right.
I think, Cameron, did you want to say something?
That I enjoy listening to Papa's stories and how they teach me lessons about life. That I'm glad that he lived to see me grow up.
Mimi, can I tell them that story that Ed told the other night? You think you'd enjoy that one? Ed Amley, who's our teaching leader at the Bible Study Fellowship, was telling this. He sort of made it up to apply to his daughter, Hollis. But anyway, he says that this divinity student, was in love with Hollis and wanted to marry her. And so he came to Ed to talk it over. And Ed asked him some questions. He said, well, now you're not through school yet. And he says, how do you propose to pay for the remainder of your school? And he says, well, I hope to get a part-time job. But he says, I'm not going to worry about it because God will provide. And he said, well, now, what about the cost of getting married and the wedding? There's going to be, even the groom has some expenses. He said, what are you going to do about that? He said, well, from this part-time job, I hope to save a little bit, but I know that if that doesn't work out, God will provide. And he said, well, now, what do you propose to live on after you're married, and how are you going to pay the rent and buy groceries? And he says, well, I haven't worked all that out yet, but I just know one thing, that God will provide. And so that was sort of the end of the interview, and so his wife Margaret cornered him and said, how'd it go? How'd it go? He said, well, I learned a few things. He said, well, tell me about it. What happened? He said, well, there's good news and there's bad news. He says, the bad news is that he really doesn't have the financial resources to support our daughter. But the good news is that he thinks I'm God. That's pretty good.
That's a good one.
One other thought or reflection, it goes back to our study of Genesis, and all through the Old Testament, but particularly in Genesis and Exodus, there's a great emphasis on the ancestry and the lineage from Adam and Eve on down through many, many generations to Christ. And I do think it is interesting. It's interesting, but inspirational to keep track of your ancestry and to learn about it and to see what those people were like that came before us. And that's why I've got a file about that thick back there, on our ancestry, and I've put some of it on the computer. But one of our projects that I haven't gotten around to is to finish putting on the computer all the information that I've collected about certain of our ancestors. It goes all the way back to about to 1660 or 1660. But little things, like my grandfather was like the first Sunday school teacher in Arcadia, Florida. Little things like this that if I don't record all this, that Cameron and others like that won't know that. And things like that of interest. There's some stories in there that, for example, during the Civil War, there were federal troops in Florida, and my great-grandfather apparently was kind of on the fence, and he wasn't going to get involved one way or the other if he didn't have to, and federal troops were apparently in control of the Arcadia area, and this is in a couple articles that were from the Arcadia paper many years ago, but the federal troops rounded up the women and children and shipped them to Youssef Island, and they had to stay there, and then the men had to stay and raise food for the federal troops. But they wanted the women and children out of the way, so they shipped them over to Youssef Island, which is down there just below Boca Grande. Little interesting things like that, but
What did they do on the island?
you see, you survived.